Hello, Forever family. I'm a faithful believer in Jesus Christ, and through him I have victories over drug addiction, alcohol abuse, and sexual addiction. And in November, I make 3 years sober from crack cocaine. I also struggle with resentment, anger, and codependency, and my name is Keola.
Hi, Keola.
I want to share with you how God saved my life, how he redeemed me from being a 10-year drug addict and a drug dealer. For those of you who know me, you know I'm passionate about two things, and that's my son Charleston back home in Hawaii and my place where I'm from in Hawaii. I'm from a place called Makaha, and Makaha is one of the darkest places I've ever been in my life. That's my hometown. I spent more than half of my 31 years there. My biological father is a product of my hometown. He was an addict, and his drug of choice was meth. In 1994, while he was taking sleeping pills, he overdosed on meth, which caused his breathing to stop. He was rushed to the hospital, and he was resuscitated sometime later. I don't quite know the specifics, but because his brain did not receive oxygen for an extended length of time, he became a permanent vegetable. I never really got the chance to know my biological father, but God still blessed me. He blessed me with my father, Bill. I spent a lot of my childhood disrespecting him and my mother. Slightly before the incident with my biological father happening, my mom was already seeing my soon-to-be dad, and they ended up getting married. My dad would eventually serve in the military for around 30 years. During that time, he was stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado, and I didn't know it then, but I truly believe that if this wouldn't have happened, I would never know what life outside of an island or life outside of my hometown could be like. Makaha is a blue-collar community, and there is only one way in, and we always make a joke, there's only one way out. I love my people there. A lot of us are trapped in darkness, and it seems like it's been like that for several generations. Many of us are gangsters or hustlers, drug dealers, and all of us were proud to be that. I was no exception. My mother knew that and wanted a better life for me, so when my dad was stationed here, it made perfect sense. I spent my childhood rebelling because I felt like my mom and dad had ripped me away from my home or my ohana. I lived here from the ages of 7 to 18. I spent a lot of summers back in Hawaii, and my goal was to move out as soon as I turned 18, go to college, and take care of my grandparents who helped raise me until the age of 7. I viewed my grandparents in a certain kind of light. You see, I tend to only look at the good in things or the pros, and I ignore the cons. And I ignored to see that they had their own struggles and their addictions. They would eventually become big enablers in my life. When 18 came around, I had a full-ride scholarship for occupational therapy. I took classes at the University of Hawaii, Kapiolani Community College, and Leeward Community College. I moved back to Hawaii 2 days after graduating. Once I started classes, I was pretty shocked to see how far back the level of education was back home. I would have to show the teachers how to use PowerPoint or set up projectors and things like that. This, for me, wouldn't keep me so engaged in school, so I started working at Radio Shack, even though I was getting grants and scholarships on top of my full-ride scholarship. During that time, I developed my first addiction, money. While working, I was making more money than anyone else, and I was only working part-time. I've been a salesman, or you could say I've had a sharp tongue for as long as I can remember. Things from there would begin to slip. I would lose interest in school. I started to do whatever I wanted to, which would lead to me hanging with the wrong crowd. My cousin, who was living with us at the time, seen what was going on and would be the first of many to take advantage of my naive nature. We started with drinking, and at family parties and birthdays and holidays. I would remember one specific event that would change my life for quite some time. We were camping at the beach, and I tried weed for the first time. I remember sitting in the tent and watching it spin around me, and I was instantly attracted to the feeling. I remember one of my friend's birthdays, spending thousands of dollars. As a child, I opposed all of this, and I despised almost everything, yet I let these habits start kicking the foot in the door, which led to them barging in. Once I started to party with my cousin, he would use me to buy weed and alcohol, and truthfully, I didn't need an excuse to party. Around that time, one of his childhood friends moved to our side of the island, and he would become one of my eventual best friends. I started going over to his house with my cousin after work or after school and would want to unwind. I'd start the night off with weed, a case of beer, and a bottle of hard liquor. It went quickly from every now and then to every day. Looking back, I noticed that I was not the type of person to get in the shallow end of things. I always jumped into the deep when it came to almost anything. More and more people would want to hang around with me because I was providing a party every night. We'd do whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted. For fun, we'd go to Makaha Park and play basketball, where I would eventually meet my gang, the Orange Street Boys. I can't explain it, but we became close quick, and I even ended up staying at one of their houses for a whole month, just partying and playing basketball. I stopped attending school, and I didn't care about work. One night I remember hanging with my cousin, and the friends I had met previous to my Orange Street gang. We drove to the end of the island where there was only one way in and one way out, and we were starting to smoke and drink. One of our friends thought it would be a good idea to lace the joint with crack cocaine, and that would be the night that everything would change for me. It started as a nightcap after partying, but the problem is you just want more and more, and you can't go to sleep after it. It became a party/social drug. Around then, my new gang noticed how much money I had, and they convinced me to start selling the drugs I was doing. I was also transitioning from working and school to partying and doing drugs. Even though I had money, I wanted more, and would also need it with my growing habits. I started selling marijuana, but the next thing you know, I was selling powder cocaine, crack cocaine, meth, and any type of pill I could get my hand on, especially any type of opioids. I gave myself the nickname or the persona Baldy. I used to shave my head. I essentially was paying rent with my drugs because my grandparents smoked. I never had any true responsibility for the first 5 years out of high school. While this was going on, I had an uncle who spent most of his adult life battling a meth addiction. Once he became sober, he started actually selling meth, but at a much higher level than me. He and I became very well-known drug dealers on the west side of Oahu. We got to points where we were going through local business owners and even politicians to get supplies. I never stopped to think, wow, I went from being clean on a full ride scholarship and working to a drug dealer, a drug doer, and an evil person. I looked up to my uncle, and at first he didn't want me dealing, but quickly he enabled me, especially since I was rolling with the top gang, and he had to use us for protection several times. I clearly didn't know there was a God that loved me and wanted better. I was God. I can sit here and tell you I've probably had over 30 or 40 cars in my life. I couldn't keep a vehicle because of the amount of trafficking I was doing, but also because I was starting to gain enemies. I even remember my car being shot at while being inside. On my 22nd birthday, with a few friends, we spent several $1,000s at Costco on liquor, and we had drugs at a party. We went to my friend's house, we owned a ranch where the cops couldn't bother us, and even by then, it didn't matter. All the cops I knew were crooked and would let me do whatever I wanted anyways. I was starting to take advantage of women around this time because at the point they were trying to hook up with me for status or the things I had. I would use any excuse I could to party, birthdays, holidays, any days. I remember on one of my friend's birthdays spending thousands on clothes, liquor, and drugs for everyone. I was buying what I thought was love, and even though I was on this emotional roller coaster, I remember feeling empty and always looking for approval. I would then seek relationship with women. Eventually, I started dating this woman who had a child. I convinced her to leave her high school sweetheart because she and I both knew her high school sweetheart was cheating on her. The relationship turned intimate. However, prior to meeting her, there was a girl that I was already infatuated with. I used to message her on MySpace in hopes of hooking up with her. Within 2 months of dating the woman with the child, the other woman who I met on MySpace started to sneak out with her friends to drink and party with me and my gang. Our paths crossed and I was head over heels. I had to play it cool though, after all. I was Baldy, the drug dealing kingpin who had it all. One night after partying, I would get her phone number and we started messaging each other on the side while I was dating the woman with the child. Eventually I worked up enough courage and invited her over to my house. By the second date, we couldn't keep our hands off one another. I developed another addiction, sex. I remember treating her like an object, not the way a woman should be treated. Still though, she was everything I thought I ever wanted. While all of this was going on, I remember thinking I was the man, dating 2 women, having sexual relationship with both, even flirting with all the girls at the beach or the party scenes. I thought everybody looked up to me, and I felt like I was living in a movie. This would come to an end as this would eventually come to end as the woman who I had actually been dating for 6 months with a child caught on. Everything in my life around this time was moving so fast. The uncle I mentioned earlier was getting bigger in the meth scene. This would lead to plenty of problems. On December 28, 2009, he was murdered. The saddest part of it was the cops did nothing. To them, this was a lifelong drug addict, a lifelong drug dealer, a lifelong criminal they were getting off the street. Everyone in my hometown knew it was a setup. This would be one of the darkest times in my life. I remember watching the pain of in my grandparents' eyes when they lost their youngest son. I remember wanting to kill whoever was responsible. I became filled with rage, along with more drugs and alcohol. I got down to 140 pounds, and I don't know how my body made it through all the abuse. I also didn't know why this woman who I was infatuated with stuck by my side. I thought it must be love. One night after partying, she started complaining that she was having pain in her lower stomach. So we decided to go to the doctors, where we found out she was 4 months pregnant. I couldn't believe it, especially because she told me she was on birth control. Nonetheless, I couldn't tell you how happy this made me. Now, even with the good head on your shoulders, raising a child is difficult. Many of you guys know that. Throw in me being an unemployed drug dealer with a drug addiction bigger than some of the mountains that are standing around us. I thought I was ready and everything would work itself out. I told myself I was going to go on one last tear and that I'd party as much as I could until my son would arrive. This led to an overdose and an episode during her pregnancy that landed me in the hospital for a few days. I was dehydrated, couldn't keep any fluids or food down. I lost 15 pounds in the short time I was there. When the doctor came in, he exposed to my girlfriend that I was still doing crack, which I had lied to her previously and told her I gave it up. She forgave me, and I worked on cleaning up. I started working at Kia, which was good, but I took advantage of the situation. I was used to having as much money as I wanted, and when my son was born, I wanted to give him everything. I had an addiction for the fancy things, which I passed down to my son. I also wanted to spoil my ex-girlfriend. Since I wasn't drug dealing, I couldn't keep up with the cost of this lifestyle. Enter the opioids. I started selling oxycodone amongst other things and started at the car lot. I couldn't believe how much people were addicted to pills. I used to buy pills from a friend of mine who was a veteran. He would sell them to me for a low cost, and I would sell them at a much higher price. I hid this from my girlfriend, and I just continued to live what I thought life was. One night, while playing basketball in Macaw Park, I tore my ACL, my LCL, and my meniscus. I remember thinking, what am I going to do? The doctor recommended a knee replacement that I ended up doing because there was nothing holding my knee together, and it wouldn't heal on its own. I remember the pain after the surgery and actually taking an oxy for the first time. It left me in a paralyzed high. I was laying on the bed with my legs hanging off the side, and I can remember not having any control of them. I couldn't lift my legs or even straighten them out. They just dangled there off the bed. I was scared, and I didn't like the intensity of that high, so much so that I started smoking marijuana again. She still had no idea about the pills, and here I am, a father who started to head in the right direction, cleaned up for about a year, but the problem was I was still serving myself. I eventually got back into selling all the other drugs I was selling before. And since I had access to them, I started doing cocaine, and then I started doing crack. Here came Baldy, jumping in the deep end again. I can tell you at my absolute worst, marijuana and alcohol were like cigarettes to me. Even powder cocaine I was doing casually every day. The real high I was after was the crack high. I lied and I hid everything from the woman I love and made an excuse to go out every night. I told her I was going out so I could make money when all I was doing was partying and selling just to stay afloat. She would eventually get tired of this, and truthfully, I did too. The problem was I couldn't stop my addiction. She finally broke up with me, and Kia fired me there soon after because I was at the point where I was getting everyone on drugs, from the lot tech all the way to the finance managers. In late 2012, I decided to reach out to my parents. I clearly had no control of my addiction, so they helped me and flew me back to Colorado. They also brought me to Pikes Peak Christian Church, where I was introduced to the real living God. I didn't let my parents know the extent of my troubles because in the back of my head, I thought everything would work out. I gave my life to Christ, and for a good 4-month stretch, I showed sign of change. So much so that the mother of my child wanted to work things out. So my pride kicked in and I said, I can do this because I know Jesus. My mom specifically didn't want me to go back because she knew and she could see that this wasn't going to work, but nothing was going to stop me. So I made my way back to Makaha. This time I stayed clean for a little while. I found a church, yet knowing that God loved me, I still tried to do it on my own. It lasted only for so long because I had no support system or people to keep me accountable. I hit my absolute rock bottom. I got so bad this time around, I can't tell you the specifics or remember the occasions that made me fall again. I just remember getting to a stretch of my life where in a 3-month span, I can specifically remember not drinking only 3 days out of it. I remember an occasion where I stayed up nearly 5 days straight, hiking 2 intense hikes during the stretch, helping out with one of the biggest funerals I'd been a part of, drinking every single day, snorting cocaine in the afternoon to keep me up to night where I would do crack till the sun came up. I remember getting so low that I would steal from my own family and pawn everything or anything I had worth value or trade for drugs. And at the end of it, I remember saying, what am I doing? I even remember being in the ditch and saying, well, I'll just keep digging the hole because I know that God will dig me out. And real quick, for anybody who's in that sort of a rut, don't take advantage of God's mercy. The reason I say this is because it took me several years to forgive myself even after God already had forgiven me. I remember I had to front the drugs I was selling and eventually my addiction overcame me again. I couldn't go to my dealer's house because I ended up owing several thousands of dollars. I had to go into hiding. I thought about my son and how much of a disappointment and a loser I thought I was to him. I also remember a voice telling me that I was better than that. I always tell people this when it came down to the most critical choice and time in my life. It was like staring down the barrel of a gun. I didn't know what my life looked like 2 weeks down the line, 2 months, or 2 years. The only thing I could think was that I was either going to die from an overdose or somebody was going to kill me because of the money I owed. By this time, Charleston, my son Charleston's mother and I were going from breaking up and making up constantly, and my heart just couldn't take it anymore. I remember praying for the first time in a long time and telling God, I know you can get me out of this. The voice in my head was telling me I need to get back to a place where I encounter God. The voice was telling me I need to reach out to my parents and get back to Pikes Peak Christian Church. So I made the decision to leave my son in Hawaii with his mother and that Jesus put my life back together. Leaving my son is something I never wanted to do. Honestly, I don't know that I could make that same decision again. But I followed that voice in my head because for some reason I knew that voice was Jesus. I called my parents and told them what was going on, and they said this would be the last time they would help. So I took my last chance. I was in a lot of pain and depression when I came back. I started working at Comcast, and at the beginning I was drinking myself to sleep every night. I remember coming to church and just hiding. This time I could try to hide all I wanted, but God was not going to let me hide. He was going to use me. Pastor Rick and I would eventually connect, and he told me about Celebrate Recovery. I decided to go, and for a person who didn't want others to judge him, I judged everyone else around me. I walked in these doors thinking there's nobody as bad as me, nobody as dirty as me. And that's when I heard Franklin's testimony. Immediately I felt ashamed. This guy's testimony was crazy, and just when I thought I had been the most atrocious person to step through these doors, God showed me that there are other people that had pasts as dark as my own. God clearly used Celebrate Recovery and Franklin's testimony to draw me closer to him. Eventually, over time, one by one, God removed my defects. I started serving in CR, and I also started ushering during Sunday services. I remember the looks I'd get and being told no for a lot of things. I'd get upset, but I also understood God was still removing things from me so I could serve him in the capacity that I do today. He kept removing the bad and adding the new and better things into my life. He shifted the way I think, and he gave me a family. He put people into my life that were able to grab me in my chaos and give me the perspective to want to change, but also the perspective of what he wanted in my life. He introduced me to my brother named Armando, and I'll never forget it. He asked me to go out to lunch with him, So I met him at the Culvers on Mesa. Within 20 minutes of our first conversation, I was crying like a baby. He could see that I had not forgiven myself and that I was still holding myself hostage in my past. Ever since then, God would use my brother to help pour into my cup and give me more perspective. He used others like Darren and Connie and Pastor Rick, my good friends Dustin, my friends Chris, my friend Thomas, to help me heal. I was finally able to forgive myself, and it felt like the weight had been lifted. I began transitioning from serving with the ushers to being a part of the tech team. I started with visuals, then lights, and eventually soundboard, where I found a healthy addiction. I replaced drugs and alcohol with serving God, and my biggest addiction, hiking. December of 2017, he had even bigger plans for me. I had a meeting with Pastor Rick, which he asked me to step up as one of the ministry leaders for Celebrate Recovery. I couldn't believe it because I wanted to lead for so long, but in the beginning, God knew it was for selfish reasons. After stepping out of Pastor Rick's office, Pastor Matt grabbed me, and then he asked me to step in his office. He told me that the tech team would be transitioning and asked if I could help lead. I remember thinking, okay, God, you really want me to step up? So I gladly accepted. And that, within the span of an hour, God deemed me capable to help lead Celebrate Recovery and our tech team. And I didn't realize it then, but there was how much more he was going to stretch me and fill my heart. He placed two men in my life that I can't thank him enough for, and that's Matt Ross and Austin Gasper. I could see Matt's relationship with God, and I had a zeal for it. I see the way he served others as well as the way he led others and trusted them. With him as a role model and being around all of the worship and tech team members, I remember finally feeling at home. I wasn't ashamed anymore. And I always joke that if it wasn't for my big little brother Austin continuously pouring into me, I don't know where I would be or where my heart would be. Austin is perhaps one of the best friends of my life, and him being 10 years younger than me, I look up to him like a little brother would a big brother. He taught me the difference between sympathy and empathy. I never met someone who had such a healthy relationship with Jesus, putting on his heart the struggles of others. I love these two guys so much, and God continued to give me more family. All I had to do was make the conscious choice of bringing my empty cup to the table so that he could use those others to pour into me with what they're at, with their overflowing cups, and he could pour into me himself. I'm here to tell you that if you're in a struggle, God has a story for you, better than any story you could ever write for yourself. If you're coming in here and just going through the motions, it's time to get outside the comfort zone. If I had any advice for you, it would come from Matthew 6:33. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all of these things will be added to you. You see, my purpose isn't my purpose anymore. My purpose is his purpose. Through the love of the members of this church, God showed me a better way. I'm here to tell you, Forever Family, you gave me so much more than I could ever ask for. So when you think you might be alone, or that you may not be significant in someone else's life, you're significant in my life. I've done almost everything here I could think of, from lockup, cleaning up the bathrooms, all sorts of events, Night to Shine, VBS, Fuel, Jingle Jam, Reengage, Men's Breakfast, Celebrate Recovery, Sunday services, you name it. I don't tell you this to be boastful, although it fills my heart to know the joy that serving has brought to me. I share this with you because if Jesus could save a wretch like me, if Jesus would voluntarily give his life for us, think about what he wants to do for you. Whether you need forgiveness or to forgive someone, whether you need healing, you need God and you need community. We're not meant to walk alone. We're meant to be in a relationship with others. Don't hold yourself hostage for the sins Jesus gave his life for. Recognize that he has the power to help you heal. Listen to that voice in your head. That's not your conscience, that's Jesus. In Celebrate Recovery, we follow the 12 steps in their biblical comparison. The season I'm in, or the step I'm in currently, is step 12. Having had a spiritual experience as a result of these steps, we try to carry this message to others and practice these principles in all our affairs. The scripture that goes with this is Galatians 6:1. Brothers, if someone is caught in sin, you who are spiritual should restore them gently. But watch yourself or you also may be tempted. What I didn't realize was that all of the people God put into my life, my mom, my dad, our pastors here, my brothers and sisters, all of the volunteers were gently restoring me, just as it says in Galatians 6:1. Now he has called me to do the same. My story might only impact one person here, and that's fine. Jesus left the 99 and searched for the one. Forever family, will you be the one? Will you allow Jesus to give you a purpose that you have been searching for? My name is Keola, and I've struggled with drugs and alcohol and sexual addiction. Jesus has saved me and wants to do the same for you. Mahalo ke akua, thank you God, and thank you for letting me share.